Welcome, entrepreneurs. I'm Ann Kay on my lifelong quest, Escaping Ordinary. Join me as I interview wildly successful and rising entrepreneurs that value travel as an essential influence in their outlook and mindset, and how it helps them live happy, fulfilling lives, build successful businesses, and craft their own extraordinary lives. I'm Ann Kay, and this is Escaping Ordinary. I am so excited about today's guest, but first, if you missed the last episode, I hope you'll check out my interview with Cassie Brown, a leader that trains other leaders how to fully step into purpose to create a legacy of impact. Today I'm excited to welcome back my friendly giant, Nic Fitzgerald, to Escaping Ordinary. He is one of my personal coaches and a creator of the Storytelling for Business framework. His program is the fastest way to build a brand, have your customers fall in love with what you do, and sell more of your products and services. How? Through telling your story through video. I've gained so much amazing insight through his program, and I'm floored by not just his detailed content, but his passion to help others create powerful stories that connect them to their audiences. Welcome back, Nic Fitzgerald, to Escaping Ordinary. Last time you were here, we touched briefly on your program, Storytelling for Business, and now I'm going to do what is proven to be the only thing that works to keep my mouth shut. I'm going to sit on my hands and listen and let you tell us more about your program.
Well, thanks, Ann, for having me back. I love being able to catch up again, just share some of my point of view and wisdom and insight with people, even though I'm a young 40-year-old, right? I have some experience. First of all, talking about the storytelling frameworks that I have, my whole life has been full and engulfed and entrenched in stories. I have absolutely loved it. I'm known as the friendly giant. I'm 6'9". I'm literally a giant, and I've always been tall. I was 6 feet tall in sixth grade. I was 6'5" as a freshman in high school, and I always stood out. And as a young kid, I was self-conscious about it, and it brought a lot of unwanted attention to me. And stories were a way for me to escape some of that, some of the teasing and those kinds of things. If any of you ever see the video of this, like my background, I've got tons of Star Wars toys and all sorts of stuff in the background in my office. It's just been, Star Wars has always been a huge part of my life as well, because it was that place where I could go and escape and feel like I was a part of the team, that kind of stuff. But my whole life, as I got older, I realized that stories were how we built relationships. I'm married. I have 4 kids. I dated and all those kinds of things before I was married, obviously. And I learned really quickly that the stories that we shared were, when we're getting to know each other, those are how we build the foundations of a strong relationship, or how we make the decision to move on and to go, cut ties. And so I saw that work a lot with just lots of different people building relationships through our stories. Because when you go on a date, that's all you're doing is you're sharing your interests, you're sharing your backgrounds, you're sharing, all these things about yourself, and you're listening to the things that they're saying back, and you find the mutual points of connection, and then you go and move forward, right? So I saw that all throughout my youth, and I still see it obviously today. But then I saw how storytelling is a way to build rapport and trust really quickly as well. Like, I was a missionary for my church for 2 years in Scotland, kid from Utah flying all the way over to Scotland and knocking on a complete stranger's door saying, "Hey, can I come in and can we talk?" Religion, right? Like, that's just crazy all in and of itself. But in order to get people to say yeah and invite me into their living rooms to sit down and talk about it, I had to be able to connect with them and build trust. You don't let strangers into your house. That's just not what. So in order to be able to have that opportunity, I had to be able to build trust really quick. And stories, again, I saw were the way to do that. I could come in with facts and numbers and opinion pieces or articles or whatever, and that would attract or connect with some people, but every single person can connect with another human being, their life experiences. So then I saw that as a young age as a way to really build trust and authority in the eyes of strangers really quickly. Then as I worked as a financial advisor. That was the last job I had before I became a true entrepreneur. And I learned that stories are, again, a way to build that trust, but to be able to sell a product or a service. There's no way I sit in living rooms or kitchen tables, or people would come into my office, and there's no way that I would be able to get them to admit or tell me or disclose to me that they had $1 million in a 401k or in an old account or in an inheritance that they had or whatever it might be. If they didn't have a connection or trust with me, people don't necessarily like wave that flag around, hey, I'm a millionaire, to complete strangers, unless they're trying to get something out of those people, right? And by hearing their stories and understanding their goals and their fears and what they wanted, me in a great position to be able to find the products that met those goals and to offer them. And I had great success with it. And then as I transitioned to owning my own business and studying marketing and business and all these things, I saw how storytelling helps people that have nothing create something very strong and very quickly. And also how people who are established use stories to how millionaires become billionaires through stories and beyond and stuff. And so the framework is all built on all of that. And of course, I worked in film. I spent 3 years working full-time in film, TV, commercials, and news, working with Oscar winners and Emmy winners and Hollywood producers and actors and all that kind of stuff. So I saw how stories were used to make money in an entertainment way as well. And so that's where this all comes from. But like I've narrowed it down and created 9 simple steps that if you follow these with your stories and your businesses, especially, you will see your stories become more powerful. You will connect with more people and you'll start selling more things as well. And so if it's okay with you, Anne, I'll go through those 9 steps really quick.
Oh, that'd be great. Yeah, it is. You've proven it to me before. And I took one of your classes and it's amazing what a difference it makes. So I would love for you to share with my listeners. Absolutely.
So step 1 is so important. And as entrepreneurs and business owners, you have to be intentional. From the moment that you wake up till the time you go to sleep at night, you have to be making purposeful decisions on your messaging, on what you're offering, all these different types of things. And so step number 1 is so simple. It's begin with the end in mind. That's a phrase that Stephen R. Covey made kind of popular with his 7 habits of highly successful individuals. The reason I say begin with the end in mind is, again, we have to have a purpose to the stories that we're telling. We want to have an intention set, to ask ourselves the question, what do we want the audience to feel, think, and do as a result of hearing the story? And when we think of that and we determine and identify those things, that helps us identify what stories that we should share in the first place. How many times have you been at a networking event or with other entrepreneurs or even just at a family gathering and somebody's just waffling on, telling their whole life story, and there's no point to it other than just to hear their own voice? We've all experienced it. We've all been guilty of it. I have as well. But when we set that intention and ask ourselves, what do we want them to feel? What emotions do we want them to experience? What do we want them to start thinking in the logical side? And then what actions do we want them to take? What do we want them to do? That helps identify which stories can lead the audience to those conclusions. And it's so fundamental that we start every story, whether it's a Facebook Live or a podcast episode or even a TikTok or an Instagram story, right?
Yeah.
If we're doing it for our business, we need to have an intention behind it. So that's step number 1. Steps 2 through 6 are all about elements within the structure of a story, but they're super simple, but they get overlooked a lot. So step number 2 is that every story has 3 simple things. That's a beginning, a middle, and an end. And people laugh at me every time I say that because it's so basic and so simple, but it's overlooked by a lot of people when it comes to their messaging. Every story has those elements, unless it's your Uncle Herb at a family gathering and he's just rambling on. But again, they have those 3 elements, but every great story does very specific things in each one of those elements to, again, invite the audience to join us on the journey and into the story, and then to bring them to that conclusion that we have determined that outcome ahead of time. So step number 3 is introduce the conflict early. Every single one of us, especially as a business owner, and even if you're not, if you're just listening to this as somebody who has a 9-to-5 job or whatever it might be, there's conflict. There was something, an event that puts you on the path that you're on now. And it doesn't always have to be something like super dramatic, but there was an event that just set you on your journey to begin whatever it is that you're working on. And when you introduce that early, that is how you can build a quick emotional connection with the audience, and you start to establish yourself, this big world that we all live in, and where you fit into it, and all these kinds of things. You think of Star Wars, that's my favorite example to use when introducing the conflict, is like the very beginning of that movie. In the title crawl, the very first sentence says it's a period of civil war. So we know that there's conflict immediately. There's war going on within this galaxy. Then throughout the story, we learn more and more about the conflict and the stuff. Okay? So introducing it early, again, just causes that emotional reaction. Step number 4 is all about introducing the key characters in your story. You are the hero of your story, but you didn't go on this journey alone. You had, family members, coworkers, a partner, a mentor, a boss. There are all these different people that are involved in your story. So introduce them. Just like Star Wars, Luke Skywalker is the main character. He was supported by C-3PO and R2-D2 and Princess Leia and Obi-Wan Kenobi. And then there's Han Solo and Chewbacca. And then there's the bad guys and the Empire and the Stormtroopers and Darth Vader, right? We need to introduce them because, again, it helps our audience see our story from lots of different viewpoints, helps build more connections, right? And then it also helps them understand that they're not alone in their own journey as well. Helps them just realize that they aren't going things alone. Step number 5 is naming an enemy. Now, this is the one that a lot of people are dancing tiptoe around, but you have to have a bad guy. There's someone or something that brought the conflict to you. And whenever possible, name it and be specific about it. If it would be possibly detrimental to an existing relationship or to somebody else's business or things like that, you have to be smart about the way you go about it. But if it was just the Empire in the Star Wars movies, that's one thing. But we get to know who the real bad guys are, who the leaders of it are, what their motivations were, all this.
Even, excuse me for interrupting, but even Disney stories, there isn't a Disney story that doesn't have the bad guy.
Yeah. Every story ever has a bad guy. Your story has a bad guy. And sometimes, depending on what your journey is, you might be your own villain in your own story for a little bit, right? You have to overcome some of those things. So absolutely, you can look at any story throughout history, and there's always a bad guy. Even the bad guys, the Empire, the rebels are the bad guys to their point of view, right? So every side has it. Step number 6 is raise the stakes. And that is all about making the conflict grow and become more intense and becomes more complex. Star Wars as an example, again, it's a period of civil war. Then we see the actual spaceships fighting, and then the Empire captures the smaller ship. And then we see the individual rebels against the stormtroopers. And then Darth Vader comes into it. Then we learn that there's a Death Star that can blow up a planet, right? The conflict just gets more and more complex as the story goes forward. Your story is the same. You discovered something, you had the conflict come into your life, and you didn't make one change and everything was roses and white picket fences. There were new challenges that came up. It just becomes more complex. So raising the stakes is so important. And the reason why it's so important is because, again, it builds the emotional tension between you and the audience. They buy in, they side with you, all those things. That line is drawn in the sand by naming an enemy. They're on your side, and they're just going to be drawn in even more, okay? Step number 7 is be detailed. You can't just gloss over the details of your story. Like in the introduction on the other episode that we did, and we talked about a double mocha fudgy, just delicious thing in a purple and white straw, right? You got super detailed about it. And when you get detailed, that just paints such a vivid picture in people's minds that they're going to connect with it, or they're going to find something in their own experiences that is going to connect or parallel it really closely. And when that happens, when you share those details, it automatically taps into the memory bank, and all of those emotional reactions get triggered again. Just like you can remember, there are certain songs that you hear on the radio or wherever you listen to it, and you can hear just 2 bars of a song, and it immediately takes you back to a moment in your life, right? That's what sharing the details does for your audience. Step number 8 is all about being genuine. If you're not genuine in your story, you're not coming from a true place, you're not fudging the story or making up parts of it in order to take up the drama or things like that. When you force yourself to do those things, or when you're not genuine in that way, it doesn't come across very well, doesn't translate. It usually flops with the audience because they can see through that. If you're trying to make yourself cry in order to hopefully get them to watch, unless you're Tom Hanks or, with years of professional training, it's hard to fake cry and have it be believable. Little kids are good at it, but they've been doing it their whole lives up to that point, right? So you have to be genuine. And when you do come from that place, it just connects. And again, it shows a real side of you, which again, you think of all the relationships that you've built in your personal life. That's all come from real, genuine, honest, and open discussion. And as you have that with your audience, it just has the same effect between them and you. And then step number 9, the last one, is if you don't do this one step, steps 1 through 8 are just a waste of time and useless completely. And it is do it now, don't wait. You don't have to be Tony Robbins or Oprah in order to have an impact or to share your story. You don't have to have a big audience, all those kinds of things. There are people that you can serve now who are looking for your message, who are looking for your solutions and your business. And when they hear your voice, they're going to recognize it and they're going to gravitate towards it. And it's going to change their life. And you're going to be able to, have the impact that you wanted while making the income that you wanted as well. But you never get there if you keep quiet and never do anything about it. That's the last step, which is, again, if you ignore that one, everything else that you've done is completely pointless up to that point. That's the 9-step brief overview of the framework on how to craft stories for your business.
I'll tell you what, people really do need to hear in more detail all of what you've just explained, because you did just gloss over it. You gave us a lot, but it is true. All of those elements are so important. Even my email is, it begins now. So I am a big proponent of not waiting, following your heart, and doing whatever it is right now. So that is key. Well, that was amazing. And thank you very much for sharing all of that with them. Okay, well, you mentioned in your bio that you are playing a lead role in an upcoming film. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yes. Oh, man, that was so fun.
And when's it coming out?
That's the thing. I don't know. Before all the COVID-19 madness broke out, they had pretty much locked the edit. They were just doing the color grade and special effects. So I'm not sure what's going to happen with it or what the timeline is now. I need to reach out to them again. But we filmed this movie over the course of 3 weeks, which is really fast for a feature film. We worked 5 days a week for 12, 14 hours. But this was in November 2019 when we filmed it. It's so fun. It's Josie Jane, the last Girl Scout. And if I could describe the plot without giving away too much, it was kind of like a mixture of Home Alone meets Die Hard, where there's bad guys and there's a good guy, and the main character is kind of like having to be stealthy and, defeat these bad guys. And so I am one of the bad guys, which was so fun to be able to play. I'm 6'9", I'm a big intimidating figure, but everyone who knows me, I'm just a big kitty. So it was so fun to be cast as a bad guy. And it's funny how I even got the role was I was in LA actually at a retreat with my friend Cassie Brown, and then I went to Disneyland with my dad and my brothers after that trip. The day that we were flying home, I got a message on Instagram from somebody that I had never heard of before. He's like, "Hey, we have a mutual friend. I'm a director on a film, and I'm looking for a certain type of guy, and our friend said I should reach out." So he asked if there was any interest on my part to read for this role. So I went the next 2 days later and met with the producer and the director, and I read some lines and did some playing make-believe. It was so fun. And I got offered the role like that afternoon. It was crazy because I had to shave my beard, so I was completely close shaved, baby face.
For those people that aren't seeing you right now, you have full mustache, full beard.
Yeah. And I have had the full mustache and beard for 5 years up to that point, and so my youngest kid had never known me without facial hair. So I had to shave my face and get this extreme haircut and everything. But I got to do all the fun things that bad guys in movies get to do. Shooting guns and smashing and destroying rooms and chasing people, and it was just so fun. The people that really know me, when you see this movie, you will be shocked that is actually me, because I do pretty crazy and mean things in this movie. But it was just fun to be able to tap into, playing make-believe and where it was safe and there aren't consequences, that kind of stuff.
You didn't have to worry about getting in trouble.
Yeah, exactly. It was a lot of fun to be able to get into that headspace a little bit and destroy a room and smashing walls and things that I got to do. Man, it was such a rush of energy and adrenaline and all that kind of stuff to be able to do that in a place where, again, I didn't have to repair anything. It was all meant to be. I could do all this stuff.
Put yourself in a position of thinking like a bad guy.
I had some, Tony Robbins talks about getting into state and stuff like that. This is something completely different than I have ever been, right? Where I'm a bad guy that wants to kill somebody else, right? And so for me, how I was able to make that transition, because it was funny, leading into a scene, I'm just me and hanging out with people. And then depending on what the scene was and what was required of me, then I would spend a couple minutes just to kind of remove myself from things to kind of internalize things. But just getting myself pumped up, I would flex my arms and my fists as tight as I could and just breathe deep and clench my jaw and stuff. And that just got the blood flowing. And I would really like try to think, I am so frustrated because of X, Y, and Z right now. And I just want this one thing to happen. And it was fun to be able to turn that on. It became where I could do it pretty quick by the end of shooting. But it was a process for sure to be able to convince myself to really own it and to not feel self-conscious about how I look or any of that stuff. Because when we go around in our daily lives, especially when we're in our element, we don't consciously think about those things at all. So it was so fun. I can't wait to see it.
I'm anxious to see it myself. Be sure you let me know when it's available.
I will.
Okay. Well, I was wondering that since you've traveled a great deal with your filming business and traveling's exposed you to experiences that have inspired you in ways, have they changed the way you look at things because you were exposed to these different influences?
Absolutely. All the travels that I've had, my career has taken me all around the U.S. and even internationally now. I was in Sweden at the end of February at the Volvo factory, stuff like that, right? But I've been able to go so many places around the country, around the U.S. especially, that what I've gained from it is, one, just being able to say that I've been able to see some of the things that, that other people you see on postcards or in movies and things like that. But what I really learned was that this world it's huge, but at the same time, we can be united so easily. And it helps me personally to understand that, just because somebody has a different background or a different point of view or worldview as me, doesn't mean that we can't be unified and be connected and help one another. Like, we're on this, regardless of what your belief system is, whether you believe in a God or a supreme power or the universe, or if you believe it's all chance, it doesn't matter. We're hurtling through space on a blue marble, and we're all here together. We don't have any choice about that, really. We're here. So why not make it the best opportunity for all of us to help and serve one another? And as I've gone through different cultures, like when I lived in Scotland, I lived in 5 or 6 different cities, all around the country in my time there. Being able to just see why people see the world the way that they do. Being able to live in Scotland for 2 years, I gained perspective from that side of, like, during World War II. I was in some places that were bombed by the Germans, and hearing stories of people who were alive at the time, the joy that they felt when they saw the American ships coming in the harbor, and, these different types of things that I would have no idea about, and hear about why people didn't like Americans at the time, or why they think that we're arrogant, or, things like that. It helped me understand myself and where I fit into things, but then also to understand why people think the way that they do. I've always been interested and fascinated in why people make the choices that they do. And traveling and actually being in places that aren't in your comfort zone, that you're places that you're familiar with, being able to see how different cultures see things. Like in Sweden, for instance, I love making eye contact and smiling with people. I make it a goal whenever I go to, like, Disney or the airport, to just, like, get as many smiles as I can. In Sweden, walking around in the town when it's bustling and tons of people are walking around, they do not like to make eye contact. They just keep their eyes forward because they want to get from point A to point B with as little distraction as possible. And I thought it was so weird because in those instances when I did get eye contact, it was very brief and they, like, flipped their eyes to somewhere else, to avoid. It was just so interesting. And just having that one little experience, and noticing it in a different place made me wonder, like, we asked some of the hosts at the Volvo factory, is like, why is it weird? Is it just because I'm tall, or is it a cultural thing? And they helped us understand that when they're out socializing, it's a totally different matter. But when they're going from work to home, or to an appointment and things like that, they just like to focus and get there. So that's the biggest thing that I've learned from travel. It has motivated me and inspired me to give my kids that experience at a young age, so that they can have that round view and understand history from the places where it took place, and hearing the other side's point of view. And then
makes such a difference in their education. It really does. They're focused, and that's it.
Yeah, and so that's for me the biggest thing that I've been able to get out of travel. Yeah, going to destinations is fun. Going and doing the touristy stuff is fun. But really learning about and connecting with people when there's a language barrier, you can still do that really quickly and be able to build connections with people. That's what I love about travel.
Do you have some place that you are anxious to go to in the future?
I'd love to go back to Scotland. I haven't been since, but I would love to just spend a couple of months just going all over Europe, Switzerland, and Norway, and just all of those places, just to see history. I love being able to walk in the places where things happen. It's amazing. There's an energy and a connection that you feel. In Scotland, going to the castles, Some of them were kept up and some of them were ruins, but like being able to know that there were people who lived and died here and had passions and desires and goals of their own, right?
And imagining living in those circumstances, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, so Europe would be great. And then obviously, and also like New Zealand and Australia would be really fun.
That's definitely a month-long trip. There's no way I'm going all the way there without at least spending a month. That's just not going to happen.
Yeah, it's like my 10-year-old really loves Japan, so that's another one that that's what he wants to go and see, right? So I just want to go wherever, but like my first priority would be just do a European trip and take it on.
Thanks so much for listening to this show. It's been great to have you here. And if you liked what you heard, please hit the subscribe button now, like, share, and leave a rave review below. It would be most appreciated. And don't forget to join us next week. I can't wait to introduce you to my next guest. While you're at it, head over to Facebook and join the Escaping Ordinary group. You'll find the link in the episode notes. Once you're there, you'll be able to interact with me and like-minded entrepreneurs also looking to escape ordinary. Oh, and when you join the group, you'll get a special gift designed especially for those escaping their ordinary. In the meantime, be looking for those precious gems of inspiration all around you when you're traveling the world or just going around the corner, and start filling your treasure chest of insights.